My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today, in the Gospel of the Mass, we have the fascinating and quite scary account of Jesus walking on the water while the disciples were far off on the lake, battling the sea, struggling against all those waves. Matthew tells us that there was an intense headwind. It's as though they were staying in the same place. They couldn't move forward. And from this moment of stress and upheaval, suddenly they see him walking on the water. He must have been like a sign of stability amidst all this turmoil, like a secure and firmly rooted walk among the churning of waters. Many artists have represented this scene over the ages. I think of the Dutch 17th century painters, the golden age of Dutch painting. Yeah, they were particularly good at representing this moment. It's a intense combination of peace and storm in one area of the sea. There's both a darkness in the environment, and then this luminous figure of Jesus reaching out. There's one painter, Ludolf Backhuizen. He would spend hours observing the storms at sea in his homeland in the Netherlands. And he would study all the details, of the water, the white caps, the clouds, and he wanted to really bring out a great, great realism. And you'd see these immense skies, these clouds, the breakers, and really you get a kind of a profound sense of man's helplessness on the sea, on those waters. Indeed, in the ancient world, water was always seen as a place of instability, as you can imagine, unstable. It was a scary place when you had these rickety boats, and it was all a symbol, really, of this cosmic chaos of evil, of destruction. The underworld, like in the book of Genesis, when the earth, we are told, it was formless and void. It was just like water. And it was a threat to us. It was like a hostile boundary that isolated nations and sometimes brought devastating storms. So when they saw Jesus there, walking on the water, they somehow understood that he was not just performing like a gravity-defying trick. He was literally trampling down the ancient forces of chaos and evil, proving that he had possessed the same power as the Creator God, who is able to subdue the deep. And so this is in the mind of the apostles as they see him. But this is also the confidence of Peter to be able to reach out to Jesus right there in the eye of the storm, this roaring storm, amidst all these scary things that he had absolutely no control over. But he knew it was Jesus. He knew that if he would somehow come closer to Jesus, he would be safe. He was terrified, but he thought, well, if I reach out to him, I'll be safe. And he understood this. This was not a mirage. It was the real Jesus that he knew. And so he felt confident. And, the fear of the waters. Perhaps some of you remember going to swimming lessons when you were a child. I went to swimming lessons on a lake. And we had to learn to face down those moments of fear as the waves and the lake heaved over the slippery dock. And the instructor would bellow out demands to dive into the cold water, even if we were shivering. There was freestyle, there was the butterfly, there was a side stroke, there was a breaststroke. We had to learn it all. And he wanted to see it all. He wanted us to prove that we could do this. But then we had to learn how to rescue someone who pretended to be passed out in the water. We had to pull in the limp body onto the dock and perform CPR to get them to come alive again. Of course, we knew that we were learning how to save someone. We knew that this skill would be essential for us one day. And we were told that we had to be ready to experience a little trauma, to swallow water and even seaweeds, to learn how to be truly of help to someone one day. But in this case, Peter stepped out of the boat because Jesus had invited him with one single word: come. I imagine Jesus reaching out, peaceful, serene, while everything around him, of course, is in utter upheaval. Peter, come. It was a command. It was like a tender voice. It was an invitation that Peter himself could have said no to. He could have stayed in the boat, but he stepped out to come closer to Jesus, even if he was taking a huge risk. And that act was an act of faith, but it only lasted a short while. You could say it was an act of confidence and an act of trust that pleased Jesus, even if it only lasted a short time, until he was overcome with fear and began to sink. Well, you and I, we too must fill our day with those little micro bursts of faith that could be sprinkled throughout the day. Right from the first moment when we leap out of bed and try to figure out what day it is and for whom we will be living, what we will do, that we could frame this new day with a kind of a microburst of faith. This is what it was for Peter. It was a microburst of faith. And there would be many others in his life. Like when he declared Jesus to be the Christ. Or when he told the Lord, you know all things, you know that I love you. Or when he let down the nets for a catch. That was an act of faith. Or his immense joy at the transfiguration when he said, Lord, it is good that we are here. Or in his epistle when he wrote to the Christians, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. That was a beautiful burst of faith that must have helped so many over the centuries. Can I make more microbursts of faith? These responses to Jesus' invitation, like Peter. I think that moment when when Peter stepped out of the boat, I think that impacted the faith of all the others. And like those swimming lessons, we can learn how to save others, even to strengthen their faith. Because afterwards, when Jesus finally got back into the boat, Matthew tells us that the men in the boat bowed down before him and said, truly, you are the Son of God. I mean, that statement came largely because of Peter's active expression of confidence in Jesus. Yes, he doubted for a moment, but when Jesus said, why did you doubt, O man of little faith? Well, it was a question, but it was also an affirmation. It was not a definitive statement. It did not discourage or define Peter. Jesus was saying, your faith, doesn't sustain you now, but it will. You get frightened by setbacks. You get angered by tiredness. And sometimes you submit to discouragement. But you did make a microburst of faith, so keep at it. And we too must make these acts of faith as we work, as we drive, as we sleep. We don't see the Lord explicitly, but he is there. And we have a purpose. And we cannot allow for a kind of a dead faith. A dead faith is a faith that is merely a bunch of information that we have learned and maybe retained like doctrinal knowledge, but it's not enough. It has to be a living faith that leaves its fingerprints everywhere we go. After a day's work, we can look at the pots that you used, the broom that you used, the steering wheel, the phone, the doorknobs that you used, and I'm sure they will bear the unique fingerprints of the soul of living faith. You grabbed that doorknob with vigorous faith. You typed on that keyboard with love, with an informed faith. You could say you leave your DNA under the microscope clearly. That doorknob has the DNA of a woman of faith, of a man of faith. Of course, DNA does not, in fact, reveal faith as such. It's only a physical thing. It's purely material. It's biological. It's cell-based. But yes, we leave a kind of a spiritual DNA. Not at a crime scene, but at the normal scenes of everyday life. Could be in the chapel, could be in your room. Where do you leave your spiritual DNA? That you nurture your faith throughout your life. Let's ask Jesus to help us make more microbursts of faith. And you could say that. Leave your spiritual DNA, those little microbursts of faith everywhere you go. Today, if we were to examine everything you touched, like physically, you could say everything you saw, everybody you spoke to, you will leave your spiritual DNA there. And the Lord will be happy with that. And He'll pick you out of the chaos of life and bring you into the stable boat of the church. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.